What's going on, everyone? And welcome back. So, you've finally hit max level in Project Ascension, Conquest of Azeroth. Congratulations. But now comes the question that every player asks. What do I do now? For a lot of players, this is where things become confusing. There are dungeons, mythics, raids, crafting, world content, professions, currencies, reputations, upgrade systems, and suddenly it feels like there are 100 different directions you could go. The problem is, not all of those activities are equally rewarding. If you start chasing the wrong upgrades first, you can easily waste dozens of hours farming gear you'll replace almost immediately. That's why in today's guide, I'm going to show you the fastest and most efficient path from a freshly max level character all the way to endgame gear. We'll cover exactly what you should prioritize, what you should avoid, how to gear efficiently, how to prepare for mythic dungeons and raids, the biggest gearing mistakes players make, and finally, how to reach your strongest possible character without wasting your time. Whether this is your first max level character or your fifth alt, this roadmap will save you a lot of frustration. Let's get started. Part 1. Understanding gear progression. Before we start farming upgrades, let's understand something important. Not every upgrade is worth chasing. One of the biggest mistakes new players make is replacing gear simply because a number is slightly higher. Instead, you should think about gear progression as building a foundation. Your goal isn't to become raid-ready overnight. Your goal is to improve your character steadily while unlocking harder content. Think of your gearing journey in 5 stages. Stage 1. Fresh max level. Your character probably has a mix of leveling gear with several weak slots. This is completely normal. Stage 2. Basic endgame gear. Here you're replacing outdated leveling pieces through easier content while learning your class in an endgame environment. Stage 3. Dungeon gear. Now your equipment starts becoming much more specialized. You're collecting stronger items that prepare you for harder content. Stage 4. Mythic progression. Gear upgrades become smaller, but much more meaningful. Every improvement starts making a noticeable difference. Stage 5. Best in slot. This is where optimization begins. Instead of replacing everything, you're hunting specific items that perfectly complement your build. Understanding these stages makes gearing feel much less overwhelming. Instead of asking, "What's the best item in the game?" ask, "What's the best upgrade for me right now?" That's how experienced players gear efficiently. Part 2. Your first priorities at max level. Now that you've reached max level, it can be tempting to jump straight into the hardest content available. Don't. One of the fastest ways to slow your progression is by trying to skip the early gearing process. Instead, spend your first hour at max level preparing your character properly. The very first thing you should do is take a look at every piece of equipment you're wearing. Ask yourself, which items are still from leveling? Which slots are significantly weaker than the others? Is my weapon still outdated? Are my accessories holding me back? Weapons should almost always be your highest priority. A stronger weapon usually provides a much larger damage increase than replacing smaller armor pieces. If you're a DPS player, upgrading your weapon early can noticeably speed up every activity you'll do afterward. For healers, the same principle applies because many healing abilities scale directly with your weapon's power. Tanks also benefit greatly since stronger weapons often improve both threat generation and overall damage. After checking your gear, organize your goals. Instead of trying to upgrade everything at once, focus on replacing your weakest slots first. That approach gives you consistent upgrades without wasting time. Part 3. Normal and heroic dungeons. For most players, the next stop is dungeons. Normal and heroic dungeons serve 2 important purposes. First, they're an excellent source of early upgrades. Second, they teach you boss mechanics that you'll encounter later in mythic difficulty. Many players make the mistake of treating heroic dungeons as nothing more than a gear farm. They're much more valuable than that. This is your opportunity to learn positioning, understand dangerous mechanics, practice your rotation, improve your interrupt timing, and become comfortable with your class before the difficulty increases. Remember, the better you play now, the easier mythic progression becomes later. While running dungeons, don't tunnel vision on one specific item. Instead, think about overall character improvement. Sometimes replacing 3 average pieces is far more valuable than farming one perfect item for hours. Consistency beats luck. Another tip is to pay attention to the stats on your gear. Higher item level doesn't always mean it's automatically better. Different classes prioritize different secondary stats, and understanding those priorities will help you make smarter gearing decisions instead of simply equipping the highest number you see. Part 4. Start building your endgame build. Once you've replaced most of your leveling gear, it's time to think beyond simple upgrades. Now you're building your endgame character. This is where many players start researching builds, talents, and stat priorities. Your gear should support your build, not fight against it. For example, if your build relies on sustained damage, you'll often want stats that improve consistency over long encounters. If your build focuses on burst damage, your ideal gear may look completely different. This is also a great time to organize your inventory. Remove outdated gear. Save useful alternative pieces if you plan on switching between mythic dungeons and raids. Keep consumables stocked. Prepare enchantments or upgrades if they're available. The players who stay organized usually progress much faster because they're always ready for new content. Another important habit is avoiding gear tunnel vision. Don't spend 3 days farming a tiny upgrade while ignoring several easier improvements elsewhere. Always ask yourself, what gives me the biggest improvement for the least amount of time? That's how experienced players progress efficiently. Part 5. Entering mythic dungeons. Once your character is comfortably equipped from easier content, you're ready to begin mythic dungeons. This is where your gearing journey really starts to accelerate. Unlike earlier dungeons, mythic content rewards preparation. Before entering, make sure you've done a few simple things. Bring consumables. Understand boss mechanics. Know your interrupt responsibilities. And most importantly, understand your class. High damage means very little if you're constantly dying to avoidable mechanics. One thing many players don't realize is that mythic dungeons reward consistency. Groups would much rather have someone who deals reliable damage while surviving every encounter than someone who tops the damage meter but dies every other pull. Treat every dungeon as a learning opportunity. Pay attention to dangerous enemy abilities. Learn efficient routes. Watch how experienced tanks pull packs together. Notice where healers struggle. Every run teaches you something new. And over time, those small improvements make a huge difference in both your performance and your gear progression. At this point, your character is starting to feel much stronger. You've replaced your leveling gear, completed heroic content, begun collecting mythic upgrades, and developed a solid understanding of your class. But you're still not finished. In the final part of this guide, we'll cover raids, best-in-slot gear, common gearing mistakes, weekly priorities, and the fastest long-term strategy to reach your character's maximum potential. Part 6. Preparing for raids. After spending some time in mythic dungeons, you'll eventually reach the point where you're ready to begin raiding. This is where gear progression becomes much more focused. Instead of replacing almost every piece of equipment, you'll start hunting very specific upgrades that fit your build perfectly. Before joining a raid, there are a few things you should always prepare. First, make sure you understand your class rotation. Raids are much less forgiving than heroic dungeons, and knowing your abilities inside and out will help both you and your group succeed. Second, arrive prepared. Bring consumables, repair your gear, empty your bags, and make sure your talents and build are optimized for the encounter you're about to face. Preparation may seem like a small detail, but it's often what separates reliable players from everyone else. Another important habit is learning the raid mechanics before your first pull. Watching a short guide beforehand can save your group countless wipes and help you contribute immediately instead of learning everything through trial and error. Finally, remember that raids are a team activity. Sometimes the best upgrade isn't your personal damage. Sometimes it's interrupting the dangerous cast, handling an important mechanic, or staying alive until the boss dies. Dead players don't contribute DPS. Surviving is part of maximizing your performance. Part 7. Chasing best-in-slot gear. Eventually, you'll reach the stage where upgrades become much less frequent. This is completely normal. Instead of replacing several items every day, you'll begin hunting specific pieces that perfectly complement your build. This is what's commonly known as your best-in-slot, or BIS, gear. At this point, patience becomes one of your greatest strengths. Don't become discouraged if the item you want refuses to drop. Some players spend weeks farming a single piece of gear. That's simply part of MMORPG progression. The important thing is to continue making progress elsewhere while waiting for those upgrades. Maybe today's raid doesn't drop your weapon, but perhaps you improve your mechanics. Maybe you earn currency for future upgrades. Maybe you help your guild clear content more consistently. Progress isn't always measured by new equipment. Sometimes becoming a better player is the biggest upgrade of all. Part 8. Weekly Priorities. One of the easiest ways to stay on track is by creating a simple weekly routine. Instead of logging in and wondering what to do, have a checklist. A good weekly routine might look something like this. Complete your highest priority Mythic dungeons. Join your scheduled raid clears. Finish any important weekly quests or objectives. Farm gold for consumables and future upgrades. Improve any remaining weak gear slots. Organize your inventory and prepare for the next reset. Having a routine keeps your progression steady. Even if you only have a few hours to play each week, using that time efficiently will help you stay competitive. Players who consistently complete their weekly goals almost always outgear players who simply wander around without a plan. Consistency beats marathon grinding. Part 9. The biggest gearing mistakes players make. Now let's talk about some of the most common mistakes that slow players down. Mistake number 1. Chasing item level only. Higher item level looks exciting, but it doesn't automatically mean better performance. If a new item has poor secondary stats for your class, it may actually reduce your overall effectiveness. Always think beyond the number. Mistake number 2. Ignoring your weapon. We've mentioned this earlier, but it's worth repeating. Your weapon is one of the biggest upgrades you can get. Many players spend hours replacing armor pieces while still using an outdated weapon. Prioritize it whenever possible. Mistake number 3. Jumping into difficult content too early. Everyone wants the best loot immediately. But entering difficult content before you're prepared often leads to frustration. Build your foundation first. You'll enjoy endgame much more when you're ready for it. Mistake number 4. Never learning boss mechanics. Some players believe better gear will solve every problem. It won't. Understanding encounters is just as important as your equipment. A skilled player with average gear often outperforms an inexperienced player wearing better items. Mistake number 5. Constantly switching builds. Every time you change builds, you usually need different gear priorities. Unless you're experimenting for fun, focus on mastering one build before chasing another. You'll gear much faster. Part 10. Long-term gear progression strategy. If there's one piece of advice I could give every new max-level player, it's this. Think long-term. Don't worry if someone else gets lucky with a rare drop. Don't compare your progress to players who have been farming for months. Focus on improving your character a little every time you log in. Replace one weak item. Learn one new boss mechanic. Improve your rotation. Finish another mythic dungeon. Those small improvements add up incredibly quickly. Within a few weeks, you'll look back at your character and realize just how far you've come. Endgame progression isn't a sprint. It's a marathon. The players who stay patient almost always reach the finish line. Final thoughts. Reaching max level is an exciting milestone, but it's really just the beginning of your adventure in Conquest of Azeroth. The game opens up in entirely new ways once you begin gearing through dungeons, raids, professions, and in-game activities. The key is to avoid feeling overwhelmed. Take things one step at a time. Upgrade your weakest gear. Learn your class. Complete your weekly goals. Challenge yourself with harder content as your character becomes stronger. Eventually, you'll reach the point where you're clearing difficult raids, completing high-level mythic dungeons, and helping newer players begin the same journey you're on today. And that's one of the most rewarding parts of any MMORPG. And that's my complete gear progression guide for Conquest of Azeroth, covering everything from hitting max level to earning your best-in-slot gear. If this guide helped you understand what to do after reaching max level, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Conquest of Azeroth content. I've got class guides, PvE and PvP tier lists, profession guides, gold farming strategies, mythic dungeon tips, raid walkthroughs, and in-game guides coming very soon. Now I want to hear from you. What's your current gear progression goal? Are you gearing for mythic dungeons, preparing for raids, or still working on your first max level character? Let me know in the comments. I always enjoy seeing where everyone is in their journey and hearing your own gearing tips. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next guide.